Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes of Ihsan. Today we're going to be, we're taking a deep dive into Sahih Bukhari Hadith,
Okay.
specifically Book 28.
Oh, right.
It's called Pilgrims Prevented from Completing the Pilgrimage.
Oh, wow. That's a very specific and kind of a niche topic,
It is.
but I have a feeling it's going to be very interesting.
I think so, too, because, whenever we look at these stories from the early days of Islam,
Mm-hmm.
they always have these, universal kind of applications, even if they seem very specific.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be looking at that today.
That's what we're here for, right? To kind of connect those dots between the very, very specific things that were revealed or that happened, 1,400 years ago,
Right.
and how they're relevant to us in our lives today.
Let's just jump right in.
Let's do it.
So one of the companions, Abdullah bin Umar,
Mm-hmm.
he was on his way to perform Umrah.
Okay, so for those who might not know, Umrah is kind of like a mini Hajj.
Yeah, it's like
It can be performed at any time of the year.
exactly.
Right.
And it doesn't have all of the same rights as Hajj,
Right.
but it's still considered a pilgrimage to Mecca.
Absolutely.
So he's on his way to perform Umrah, and he's basically prevented, or he encounters these afflictions, the Hadith says,
Interesting.
which I assume means some kind of conflict or danger or something that's preventing him from continuing.
Yeah, it could be logistical. It could be, some sort of strife or tribal warfare.
Yeah, exactly.
All of those things were very common.
Very real possibility
Back then.
back then.
Yeah.
So anyway, he remembers a time when the Prophet, peace be upon him,
Okay.
faced a similar situation during the year of Hudaybiyah.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one.
Yeah. So can you just remind everyone, what happened during the year of Hudaybiyah?
Yeah. So this is 628 CE.
Okay.
And tensions were really high between the Muslims in Medina and the Quraysh tribe who controlled Mecca.
The Quraysh being the ones who were initially opposed to the Prophet's message.
Yeah. Yes, they were the dominant tribe in Mecca and initially very, very opposed
Okay.
to the Prophet's message.
Right.
So the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his companions set out from Medina to Mecca with the intention of performing Umrah.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to do a peaceful pilgrimage.
Right.
And they get to Hudaybiyah, which is right outside of Mecca.
Okay.
And the Quraysh, basically, they block their entry.
Oh, wow. So they're you can't come in.
Yeah, no, you guys are not welcome here. We don't trust you. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of tension.
Yeah, that sounds really tense.
It was a very, very pivotal moment in Islamic history because instead of
Okay.
the Muslims fighting back, the Prophet, peace be upon him, chose diplomacy.
Right.
He negotiated a treaty, which actually at the time seemed like it was very unfavorable to the Muslims.
Oh, really?
But it was actually a really strategic move
Okay.
because it paved the way for the peaceful conquest of Mecca just 2 years later.
Oh, wow.
So huge lesson there in patience and in strategic thinking.
Yeah, sometimes what seems like a setback
Right.
is actually setting you up for something bigger and better.
Exactly. And sometimes, fighting fire with fire is not the right way to go. Sometimes diplomacy is the way to go.
Yeah, I like that.
So back to Ibn Umar.
Okay.
Facing his own roadblock, he says, and I'm quoting here, "If I should be prevented from reaching the Kaaba, then I would do the same as Allah's apostle did. So I assume the Rum for Umrah as Allah's apostle assumed the Ihram for Umrah in the year of Hudaybiyah."
Okay, so he's I'm going to follow the Prophet's example.
Exactly.
What exactly did the Prophet do?
So he instructed his companions to shave their heads, exit the state of Ihram.
Which is that sacred state you enter when you're doing a pilgrimage.
Exactly. You're in that ritual purity.
Yeah.
And perform Umrah the following year.
Okay, so they basically postponed it.
Yeah, they adapted.
Yeah.
Right? So they were prevented at that time. They couldn't do it, so they adapted.
So it's the objective was to perform Umrah, and when that wasn't possible at that time,
Mm-hmm.
then they found an alternative
Exactly.
that still honored the intention.
Absolutely. So it's not always about rigid adherence
Right.
to the letter of the law in every single circumstance.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the deeper principles and then adapting.
Yeah, sometimes things come up.
Yeah.
Life throws you curveballs.
Have you ever had a trip canceled or something where you're like,
Oh my gosh, yes, all the time.
yeah,
Especially last minute things.
ugh, it's the worst.
I had this hiking trip planned
Okay.
just last month.
Yeah.
I had all my gear ready, itinerary all planned out,
Nice.
and then I sprained my ankle.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
That's the worst. You're all prepared and then
I know. Yeah, life happens.
I so frustrating, but I feel like that's kind of what this is talking about.
It is. It is like, how do we deal with that disappointment?
Yeah.
How do we shift our focus from what we can't control to
Yeah.
what we can control?
Like our intention and our attitude.
Yeah,
Exactly. And that's where the growth happens.
I like that.
Right. It's like in those moments of unexpected change
Mm-hmm.
that we discover our own resilience
I love that.
and we discover our own resourcefulness. Like, okay, this didn't go as planned,
Yeah.
but what can I do now?
Yeah.
You know? And it's about trusting that even though the path looks different,
Mm-hmm.
you can still reach your destination.
Yeah.
Maybe even take a more scenic route along the way.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Sometimes the detours
Yeah.
are the best part.
Yeah. So it's not just about religious rituals.
Right.
It's like a life lesson.
It's about how we navigate
Yeah.
the uncertainties of life.
Were there other instances of this, like adaptability
Oh, yeah.
in those early days of Islam?
Absolutely. These stories are full of them.
Oh.
So, like we were talking about with Ibn Umar facing that obstacle on his journey,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and remembering what the Prophet did at Hudaybiyah,
Right.
he initially intended to perform Umrah, but then he thought about it. You know, he reflected on the situation,
Yeah.
and he decided to actually make Hajj obligatory on himself, too.
Oh, wow. So he's like combining both pilgrimages.
Yep. He's like, you know what? I might be prevented from doing these separately,
Right.
so I'm going to just do them together.
Okay. That's really interesting.
And that's another like amazing concept in Islamic jurisprudence,
Okay.
this combining of acts of worship.
So like when circumstances
Yeah, when it makes sense.
demand it.
Exactly.
But-
And that's not just Ibn Umar like coming up with this on his own.
Right.
He was known for following the Prophet's teachings very meticulously.
Mm-hmm.
So this was also based on the Prophet's precedent.
Okay. So the Prophet had done this too.
Yeah, like at Hudaybiyah, when they were initially blocked from entering Mecca,
Okay.
they ended up performing both Umrah and Hajj rituals.
Right. Right. The next year.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's all about the intention.
It is. It's about the spirit of the law,
Yeah.
not just the letter.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Flexibility, prioritizing intention.
Okay. So I'm seeing like a theme here
Mm-hmm.
with all these stories.
That's
Like we
wonderful.
talked about adaptability.
Yeah.
And this one is kind of similar, right?
It is. There's another hadith in Sahih Bukhari, also from the time of Hudaybiyah,
Okay.
that really highlights this theme of adaptability.
Okay. Listening.
So this one involves Abdurrahman bin Abu Layla.
Right.
He's narrating a story about Ka'b bin Umrah.
Ka'b bin Umrah, wasn't he the one who had those lice?
That's him, yeah. He was suffering from lice during the journey.
Oh, man, I can only imagine.
It's like the worst time to have lice.
Especially in that heat.
In that climate, yeah, absolutely.
And you're with all these people.
Yeah, you're in close proximity.
It's not ideal.
Not ideal at all.
Okay, so what happened?
So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he notices Ka'b, and the lice are literally falling from his head.
Oh, gosh.
And he asks him, you know, are your lice troubling you?
No.
And Ka'b, obviously very distressed,
Yeah.
says yes.
Okay.
So the Prophet tells him to shave his head. Okay, but isn't that done at the end of the pilgrimage?
You're right. That's usually done like at the very end.
Right.
When you're completing the rites.
So why would he tell him to do it now?
That's the interesting part. They're still in Hudaybiyah.
Right.
But through divine revelation, the prophet received guidance that allowed this adaptation.
Oh, okay.
So he gave Ka'b permission to exit the state of Ihram early because of this hardship.
Okay, so like a special dispensation.
Exactly. And he offered him the option of fidya.
Right. Fidya, that's like the compensation you do when you can't fulfill an obligation in the usual way.
You got it. And in this case, Ka'b had 3 options.
What were they?
He could fast for 3 days.
Okay.
He could feed 6 poor persons.
Okay.
Or sacrifice a sheep.
Okay. So again, like finding that practical solution.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is this instruction to Ka'b,
Mm-hmm.
it actually became a general ruling for all Muslims.
Oh, really? So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, so the verses of Al-Fidya were revealed
Okay.
in response to this incident.
And they guide anyone who is unable to complete the pilgrimage due to like illness
Okay.
or some other unforeseen circumstance.
Wow, so it started with this one guy,
Yeah, a very specific situation.
and now it applies to everybody.
It's about the wisdom and foresight
Right.
of the Islamic teachings.
Yeah.
Solutions to individual problems
Right.
often become these guiding principles for the whole community.
It's like extracting this universal lesson
Mm-hmm.
from a very specific situation.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got resilience, we've
Mhm.
got adaptability,
Yeah.
and this commitment to your obligations, even when things get tough.
Right.
Like, is there anything else these stories from Book 28,
Oh, yeah.
from Sahih Bukhari, can teach us about facing obstacles with grace and faith?
There's this one hadith in Sahih Bukhari, Book 28, that I think really captures the essence of Hajj and, like, its transformative power.
I'm listening. What does it say?
So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever performs Hajj to this house, Kaaba, and does not approach his wife for sexual relations nor commit sins while performing Hajj, he will come out as sinless as a newly born child."
Whoa, that's pretty powerful.
Right.
It's like this idea that Hajj purifies
It
you.
cleanses you.
Like it wipes the slate clean.
Hitting the reset button
Yeah.
on your spiritual state.
Okay, so it's not just about the rituals.
Yeah.
It's about like a deeper...
It's about inner transformation.
Yeah.
It's about seeking a closer connection with God.
And that idea of like purification and renewal,
Mhm.
I feel like that's something that...
It's universal.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of different traditions.
Many cultures and faiths have these rituals
Yeah.
that are aimed at cleansing the soul
Yeah.
and like starting anew,
It's that like, human desire to like...
to shed the baggage of
Yeah.
the past and be like, okay, I'm starting fresh.
Exactly.
And Hajj, with all of its emphasis on, humility and devotion
Mhm.
and seeking forgiveness.
It's like this powerful framework
Sure.
for achieving that.
So even though we've been talking about all these challenges
Right.
of being prevented from doing Hajj,
Mm-hmm.
like, we shouldn't lose sight of the goal,
Exactly.
like what it's actually supposed to do for you.
To emerge transformed,
Yeah.
cleansed, and closer to God.
It's about the intention again.
It all comes back to that. It's like
Yeah.
even when there are obstacles, the intention remains.
Right.
And that's what matters.
Okay, so to kind of sum up all these stories from Book 28 of Sahih Bukhari,
Mm.
they're really highlighting, resilience,
Yeah.
adaptability.
Flexibility.
Yeah, and like, not losing sight of your intention.
Commitment to your obligations.
Yeah.
Even when things are tough.
Yeah, and like finding workarounds
Exactly.
when you need to.
Yeah.
Okay, so these companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him,
They really embody these principles.
they do. They're like setting the example
They're role models for us.
of how to navigate
Life's challenges.
with grace and faith.
Amazing. So much wisdom packed into these stories.
They're timeless,
They are.
They're as relevant today as
Yeah.
they were 1,400 years ago.
So before we wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything you want to leave our listeners with to ponder?
Yeah, I'm going to leave you with this.
Okay.
If even the most sacred acts of worship
Okay.
can be adapted
Yeah.
to fit unforeseen circumstances,
Right.
what does that tell us
Ooh,
about how we should approach other areas of our lives?
that's a good one. I'm going to be thinking about that.
It makes you think
It does.
to how we respond
Yeah.
to challenges.
Yeah, like how much are we holding on and how much are we letting go?
exactly. Yeah.
It's about finding that balance
That's a good point.
between steadfastness and adaptability,
Yeah.
which is not always easy,
No, it's not.
but it's a good goal to strive for.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today
It was my pleasure.
on this deep dive into Sahih Bukhari.
Always a pleasure to be here. And hopefully everyone listening
Yeah.
can take away some valuable lessons
Yes,
and apply them to their own lives.
Inshallah, on